Okay, and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to take a look at a video from another channel and give some feedback on some of the comments that they've made regarding EV cars, the technology and the reliability of them. So don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next channel, and let's go and have a look at that video.
Although more and more consumers are becoming interested in electric vehicles, there are many serious concerns with EV ownership that you really need to be aware of before you make a decision. So for this video, I'm going to share the 10 biggest issues and headaches of electric vehicle ownership that you really need to know about.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the first 5 of these, and then I think I will do another video for the further 5.
But before we get into it, remember, if you enjoy and get value out of this video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.
I will put in the description the page where I found this video, so you can go and watch it for yourself, and you can follow them as well if you wish.
So let's start off with the first issue with EV ownership, which is public chargers. Although the concept of using a public charger sounds very straightforward, your car has a low charge, you pull up to the charger, plug it in, wait maybe 30 to 60 minutes, and then off you go. Unfortunately, it's nowhere near that simple.
Yeah, it is actually. I've been driving my EV for about 8-9 months now, and I think apart from one charger, and for whatever reason it just wouldn't work. I think it was locked down to a particular business and only they could use it. It was a local hospital, but other than that, every charger that I've gone to use, I've literally plugged in and charged. Now there is legislation changes in the UK that came out last October that states that any public charger over 50 kilowatts should or has to have a method of contactless payment. That's not being enforced at the moment. It needs to be retrofitted to a lot of the car chargers out there at the moment, so a lot do rely on you having their application to use it, which can mean you've got maybe 4, 5, 6 different applications on your phone depending on which chargers you stop at. However, it is legislation, it is coming into force, and hopefully we should sort of see those chargers being retrofitted as we go through 2025. But other than that, yeah, it is actually easy. Plug it in, charge, go for a brew.
The first issue with public chargers is that they can be extremely unreliable. It is very common to come up to one and have it not working at all.
Not had that apart from, like, say, one, and it wasn't reported as not working. You just wouldn't accept my debit card. So I think it was locked down to a private company card. Yep, they just work. I use ZapMap as well, so if I am going to be traveling around, I will use ZapMap. And on there you can see if any of the chargers on your route are out of service, and it's quite up to date. It's not, I don't think it's quite live, but it's live enough from a lot of the data for maybe within the last 15-20 minutes or so.
And not only can they be extremely unreliable, but it's not as simple as just tapping your credit card and charging your car. All of them have their own proprietary app that you need to download, and some of them can be really frustrating to use, or they might not work at all.
That is being fixed in the UK at least. It's just going to take a bit of time, but I've not had any of the apps fail to charge a car yet.
And even if the chargers are working, you might be faced with a lineup of cars ahead of you, all waiting to charge just like you are. And it's not so easy that you can just go to another charger down the road, because they're often nowhere near as common as comparable gas stations.
Again, I guess this guy's American who's saying gas station. In the UK, we've got about 7,000 petrol stations, forecourts in the UK, and over 70,000 EV public chargers. So there are far more public EV chargers than there are petrol stations. You just need to know where they are. And if you live in an area which you're familiar with, you probably pass them every day and you've not actually seen them or looked at them. Get ZapMap, Apple Maps when it's on CarPlay mode, and you'll be able to see where they all are close to where you live or where you're going to be travelling to.
Now, some are certainly better than others. Tesla is a very notable example that has a very reliable charging network and a better network than most other brands. But unfortunately, when it comes to every single other charger out there, you really can't rely on them on a regular basis.
Again, I totally disagree. Not had one fail on me yet.
They are just way too problematic and unreliable. And having issues with charging is a problem that's also linked to the next major issue with electric vehicle ownership, which is unpredictable driving range. Even though an electric vehicle might advertise a certain driving range, say for example a range of 300 miles or around 500 kilometers on one charge, the real-world range can be completely different. For example, it's well known that extreme climate conditions, such as very cold or very hot weather, can have a very severe impact on the driving range.
Okay, so this is true. The cold weather does have an impact on the driving range of the vehicle. It has an impact on the range of a ICE vehicle as well, so it's not just EVs, but it's probably more noticeable on an EV because the range is a lot more accurate. With mine's got a 200-mile range during the summer, which it pretty much gets to most of the time, depending on how I drive it. And at what speeds. If a more urban work, it will do it. If a more long runs on the motorway, then it's less efficient, so it might be under that 200. At the moment, it's January 2025, it's gone cold in the UK. I'm looking at about 160 at the moment, 160 to 170 thereabouts. And if I have the heaters on full and all the electrics, I have my lights on, that is going to degrade that battery even further. But again, you do have these similar issues with ICE cars, and it's just how you adapt to them. One of the misconceptions I think people have with EV cars is it's the same as an ICE car, therefore I can get in and I can drive it exactly the same as I can an ICE car. It's not quite the same. There is a little bit more planning involved, maybe if you're doing longer journeys. But generally, if I decide I suddenly need to go on a long run and my car hasn't got enough charge in it, I'll just go and put it on charge. It'll charge it and I can get on my journey. It's not a big problem. But I think sometimes the media and a lot of these YouTube channels make it out as it is a huge, huge problem when actually it's not.
And even though most EVs have very sophisticated thermal management systems and even heat pumps that are supposed to help you in really cold weather, if you live somewhere that has, say for example, extremely cold winters, you might still suffer from a range loss anywhere from around 20 to 30%, and that's a major problem. And this is also true if you do a lot of long-distance highway driving or if you do any kind of towing, both of which can also impact the range of an EV. And just like most other electronics that have batteries, the manufacturers typically recommend that you keep the battery anywhere from 20 to 80% charged.
Now, I've not heard any manufacturer say that ever, that you have to keep it between 20 and 80%. Maybe when they first came out, with the Nissan Leafs, maybe, which had poor battery management, maybe it was the case then, but it's certainly not the case now, and it's definitely not the case on all the new batteries that are coming out with the new technologies built into them. You can charge up to 100%, and there is absolutely no problem at all. Even some of the older batteries, you can charge them up to 100%. I charge mine's on charge at the moment. It came down to about, I think it's about 10-12% yesterday when I came back from a long trip. I stuck it on charge. It's charging up now. It'll charge up to 100%, and then I'll unplug it and I'll leave it there. There's no issue with charging up to 100% at all. The battery degradation thing is quite a myth. It does degrade, as I'll discuss in a moment, but it's not to the extreme levels as what some might want you to believe.
So even though it might theoretically have a range of say 300 miles, the actual usable range, if you care about the life of the battery, is actually much less than that. But there are other issues with the batteries that you need to be aware of, which brings us to the next major issue and headache of EV ownership, and that is battery degradation. Unfortunately, just as they do with electrical devices, the batteries in electric vehicles do degrade over time, and they will slowly lose their capacity. It's generally accepted that most electric vehicles will lose approximately 5 to 10% of their capacity over the first 100,000 miles or 160,000
Okay,
kilometers.
so in the first 2, 3 years, 4 years of ownership, you will see the biggest degradation in the battery. It could be as much as 10%, but mostly maybe 5 to 7%. You probably wouldn't notice that loss of mileage in day-to-day driving. As facts on a piece of paper, these stand out. But when you're actually driving a car day to day, are you really going to notice like you're not getting an extra 5 miles maybe for every charge? Again, it depends on how you drive it, depends on where you drive it, what conditions you drive it in, how lead-footed you are. Do you accelerate off the line? Do you like to drive more casual and more laid back, accelerate slowly? Most EV car drivers actually quite like the acceleration, I'll be honest. But it's all these variables that make the difference as to how much battery degradation you will get, or rather what you will notice. So cold weather makes a difference, so does accelerating fast off the line. Battery degradation is probably going to be less than both of those combined on an average journey in the winter.
Which means if you buy an EV that has a range of say 300 miles when it's brand new, after several years, it might only be able to travel say around 270 to 280 miles.
270 to 280 miles out of 300. But you've done, what I think he said, about 100,000 kilometers in that car. That's a fair trade-off. Not many people are going to get that kind of mileage out of their EV before they decide to swap it or exchange it or sell it. So again, you're not going to notice it on a day-to-day trip. It's just media inflaming an issue that actually isn't an issue.
And this degradation will only increase as the vehicle ages and as the mileage increases over time.
Again, is kind of true, but not in the way that he said. The degradation does carry on, but it kind of drops rapidly the first sort of like couple of years, and then it kind of plateaus with a very shallow drop. And cars of over 150 to 180,000 miles have probably lost no more than 10% of their battery life. And again, how many of you are actually going to keep your car running for that long?
Which is why I always recommend that anybody that wants to buy an EV, buy the one that has the most amount of range. And if the car has a choice between two different batteries, a standard range and a long range, it's always best to go with the longer range battery, just to give yourself more of a buffer and protection against battery degradation.
So again, I have to disagree on that comment purely because I've got the MG4 standard. I could have gone and got the MG4 extended range, but the price difference didn't really quite feel right. It's not a huge difference, but the price was quite substantial, and mine's got about 20 brake horsepower more than the extended range, because obviously the bigger battery weighs a lot more in the vehicle, so it slows it down, or it hasn't got the same acceleration. So actually having the lighter car with the shorter range is a lot more fun to drive, and trust me, it is a very, very fun car to drive.
But unfortunately, battery degradation is not the only issue that you need to be concerned with, which brings us to the next major problem with EV ownership, and that is the tires. Now, if you're buying an EV, you might be thinking that you're going to save yourself a ton of money on maintenance, especially when it comes to things like oil changes, which are not necessary on an EV. The brakes on an EV are also known to last an extremely long time as well, but one maintenance item that's known to not last very long are the tires, and this is a major problem. Because electric vehicles typically have a lot of power going to the wheels, and they're also much heavier than normal vehicles, this puts a lot more wear on the tires. So depending on the vehicle that you're looking at, you could be replacing your tires 2 to 3 times more often than a comparable conventional vehicle.
Not from my experience, and not from what I'm reading on forum posts as well. My car's done about 7,000 miles. The tires have hardly been worn away at all. Some people are reporting that they're having to change their car tires maybe sort of like maybe every 15,000 to 18,000 miles, which to me isn't that bad. But again, like everything, it depends on how you drive it. If you do drive your car fast and hard, you accelerate off the line all the time at full acceleration, then yeah, you are going to go through tyres at a rapid pace. Friends of mine that in the 90s, late 90s, they had an XR3i and an XR4. They were going through tyres like there was no tomorrow because they were driving them fast and hard. It's just physics. They will wear out faster. You know, it is down to how you drive. If you drive more laid back, more casual, more going with the driving Miss Daisy style, you're not going to go through tyres 2 to 3 times more than an ICE car. They're going to go through them at the same rate. And another misconception for another video is about tyres having specific EV rated tyres, which again is a complete fallacy. There is no such thing as an EV tyre. They're the same tyres for every other manufacturer car out there. It's just speed ratings really and sizes, but there's no EV specific tyre. Don't fall for that one if your garage tells you you need EV tyres, because it's not true.
So all the money that you're going to save on brakes and oil changes is just going to be spent on tires. And if you were thinking that an electric vehicle was going to keep you outside the dealership or garage, think again, because that brings us to the next major issue with EVs, and that is the cost of repairs, servicing, and dealerships. Even though theoretically EVs are relatively simple when compared to a conventional vehicle, you basically have a large battery pack and an electric motor, unfortunately it's just not as simple as that. EVs can still have very complicated cooling systems, a lot of complicated electronics, computer modules, and not to mention all the same features as a conventional car, with all the sensors, cameras, and screens that go along with them.
So your EV will have the same technology as an ICE car. It may have more as more cars get released, the technology increases, and the complication within the software themselves gets more complicated. Okay, that's just progress. That's evolution. You look at Windows 3.1 when it came out in the 1980s, and compare that to Windows 11 now. They're completely different, but one is much more complicated in the background than the other one. Windows 3.1 was extremely basic, whereas Windows 11 is far more complicated. There's a lot more tasks and activities going on in the background, but you don't need to know that because you are using it to do your spreadsheets, YouTube channels, or whatever. Now, there is an issue with garages where backstreet garages may not have the same level as understanding or technical ability to carry out repairs, because we are talking about very high voltage systems here on EV cars, so there is a certain amount of technology, equipment and safety that goes around them. However, with a dealership, you are paying for that. If I went and bought a Bentley car, I wouldn't necessarily take it to a backstreet garage for them to try and rip the dashboard apart to fix one of the clock or the dials. I would take it back to Bentley because they are the specialists. Same goes for EV cars. If you're buying an EV car, don't think you're going to be able to save money by taking it to your local backstreet garage, because chances are that's not going to be the case. Tyres, yes. Brakes, yes. Topping up coolant systems, probably. But beyond that, it's going to be a dealership or specialist. But I say that's the same for ICE cars as well.
So these vehicles can be extremely complicated to repair, and when something does go wrong with them, they typically do cost more than a conventional vehicle. And not only that, but because EVs have not been on the market for a terribly long time, the repair knowledge is just not there yet, especially when compared to conventional vehicles or even hybrids.
And that's I agree with that statement, but that's not an issue with the EVs. That's an issue with the garages not being up to speed or having the right equipment for EVs to be able to service them. So it's not an EV problem. That is a garage service station type problem.
And for certain brands, like say for example Tesla, that can be a major headache because they typically have a very limited network when it comes to service centers, and servicing them can be a major pain.
Okay, so in terms of Tesla, I have a friend who has a Tesla, and the feedback I've had is that they are absolutely phenomenal with their customer service, with their support, with their network, their service centres. Hasn't got a bad word against them at all. So maybe say this video is last year, so maybe it's a little bit outdated. Maybe it's where they are in America. Maybe they don't have as many Tesla service stations around where this guy lives or operates from. But from the UK, people that I know that have got Teslas, a lot of people in the company I work for have got Teslas. Nobody's ever said that they're a terrible company, and completely the opposite, to be fair. Okay, so that's what I've covered in this video. I do like to look at these videos, see what other people are saying about EVs, and where there are comments that I might disagree with, or have changed, or are dated, or are quite media published, as in trying to scaremonger people. Like how many times you see the news article of an EV being on fire. Well, pretty much every time one happens, but how often do you see one about a petrol or a diesel car being on fire? Very, very rarely. And yet, more petrol car fires happen than EVs. It's just the way the media likes to spin these things. And what I wanted to do was, for those people that haven't got an EV yet, or are looking to potentially go into that area, I just wanted to make a video to say, actually, you know what? Everything on the internet isn't true. And I'm an EV owner. I've had one for about, like I say, 8-9 months now. And I'm happy with it, and I would not go back to an ICE car at all. I love the EV. It's fantastic to drive, so relaxing, nice and quiet, fast off the mark, so cheap to run, especially if you've got at-home parking, where you can have a charger and actually charge at home. Octopus Energy do 7 pence per kilowatt, I think it is, down to 2 or 3 pence if you go into one of their smart tariffs, which not all cars are compatible with, but if you can, 2 to 3 pence a kilowatt is so cheap to charge your car. On mine, you're probably talking £1 or £2 to be able to do 200 miles, which is completely unrealistic in a petrol or diesel car. So anyway, thank you for watching. I will do another video with some of these other comments from other videos. Like and subscribe so you don't miss it, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.